Tonight we have a very special guest, a man who has written over 30 books, who's an internationally known figure as an author, lecturer, philosopher, a stand-up comedian, a sit-down comedian, stand-up philosopher, you name it, Mr. Robert Anton Wilson. Bob, thanks very much for being here tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Good. Now, your latest book is entitled Everything is Under Control. It's a conspiracy encyclopedia, is that correct?
Well, it's not exactly an encyclopedia, it's more a chrestomathy. If we did an encyclopedia of all the conspiracy theories around in this country today, it would be at least as long as the Britannica, 22 volumes minimum. This is a chrestomathy. It's some of the wilder and weirder conspiracy. It does cover a lot, though, I must say, as much as one book can.
How did you choose from among the millions of conspiracy theories that are current these days? How did you choose which ones to include in the encyclopedia?
Well, there were a couple of criteria. I wanted to put in the weirdest, craziest, goofiest ones, and I also want to put in the most plausible ones, so that the reader would be constantly alternating between laughing out loud at this nonsense and wondering, hey, some of this might be true, which is the ideal state for a reader to be in, I think.
Okay. What got you involved in the interest in conspiracy theories in the first place?
Well, actually, that gets into the new book, too, how it all started. It started with a fellow I used to know named Kerry Thornley, who was one of the co-creators of the only religion I've ever been able to really enjoy, the Decoding religion, which is based on worship of Eris, the goddess of chaos, confusion, discord, bureaucracy, and international relations, the 5 levels of chaos in the world. And, you know, the argument for the existence of Eris is very simple. If Eris doesn't exist, who put all this chaos here? Nobody can answer. Anyway, Kerry got indicted by Jim Garrison as one of the Kennedy assassination team. And Kerry thought at the time, and all of us who knew him thought, that Garrison was just off his head or an unscrupulous demagogue. And then, to our great astonishment, a couple of years later, Kerry announced that he thought it was true, that while he was in the Marines, he thinks he remembers that he volunteered for an experiment, and he thinks they gave him drugs and brainwashed him and turned him into a zombie like the Manchurian Candidate. So he was part of the Kennedy assassination, but he didn't know it. Only he has some memories come back now and then.
Was he one of the fake Oswalds that were?
That was one theory. That was one of the theories Garrison promoted. Kerry met a guy in a bar in New Orleans who he thinks was E. Howard Hunt, who told him he was writing a book called Hitler Was a Good Guy. And he doesn't remember anything else of that conversation. He met David Ferry once, another of the leading suspect. He doesn't remember that conversation. He was living 2 blocks from Oswald, whom he knew in the Marines, and he never met him all those months. They were living 2 blocks apart. So Kerry thinks his memory has been tampered with. And at one point he thought I was his CIA babysitter. Then you're really involved in conspiracy theory when you got a friend who's accused of being an assassin, and he's accusing you of being the CIA mastermind. So you can't ignore the subject after that. That's how I came to write Illuminatus, and after that, I can never completely, although I've written on dozens of other subjects, and I hate to be identified with conspiracy theory because I have so many other things that I think are more important that I've written about. But I can't leave it alone entirely because every week in the mail I get tons of stuff by people who've read Illuminatus and want me to be informed about the latest conspiracy that they've just discovered. So I can't get out of the conspiracy field entirely.
Well, what is it about the human psyche that seems to be drawn towards these conspiracy theories? Is it some love of the unknown, or some idea that there may be forces out there that are controlling our destiny? Or
well, I think there are 3 factors. A, nobody likes to take the blame for their own problems, so they look for somebody else to blame. And if you can find a big enough group, you've explained everything in your life that doesn't work.
That's the parental conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's the fault. If it's not your fault or your parents, it's the Jesuits, the Freemasons, the Jews, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, and you got a wide choice to pick who to blame.
Rich white man.
Yeah, as long as you don't have to blame yourself. That's one motive. And another motive is that we are living in very weird times. The world is changing faster and faster, which I think is due to the acceleration of information flow in the modern world. Information is increasing, and the transmission of information is going faster and faster due to internet and the whole computer revolution, which means that most people are living in a world they can't understand. And when people can't understand something, they tend to go for sinister explanations of it. Somebody is manipulating things in a way I don't like. That's the way people feel when things change too fast and they can't understand it. And the third reason is, of course, that there are lots of conspiracies around. You're supposed to be a nut if you think about conspiracies, unless you're a district attorney. Then you can bring in 20 people into the court and charge them under the RICO law with conspiracy, even if they never met one another. And, I mean, well, the government does recognize conspiracies. Every government does. There are laws against conspiracy. And conspiracies do exist. The question is, do any really big ones exist, such as the ones imagined in the more extravagant conspiracy theories?
Now, it's interesting that you should bring up that this may be a modern phenomenon, because if you go back through history, as you do in the encyclopedia, there have always been conspiracy theories. Was it Ishmael Reed, the novelist, who said the history of the world is the history of the war between secret societies?
Yes, I like that quote quite a bit because there's a certain element of truth in it, but it's just bizarre enough to make people sit up and say, what?
It's more of a conspiracy of stupidity, it seems like, is running the planet.
I think that is the strongest conspiracy on the planet, is the conspiracy of the stupid.
Yeah.
To prevent schools from educating their children, because they want their children to be as dumb as they are, to prevent television from putting anything intelligent on as much as possible. One of the ones that really fascinates me is the Howard Hunt, Richard Nixon, Flight 553, Bay of Pigs mystery. Well, in the Watergate tapes, Nixon tells Dean, Hunt wants $1 million. And Dean tells Nixon that Hunt wants $1 million, and Nixon says, well, I can get $1 million. And then he goes on and says, Hunt might spill the whole Bay of Pigs thing. And then later he said that to Haldeman in another tape. He said, Hunt is threatening to spill the whole Bay of Pigs thing. Now, I wrote a book many years ago in which I asked the question, what Bay of Pigs thing hadn't come out by 1974 that Nixon was willing to pay $1 million to cover up? Well, it seems that Ehrlichman, in his book about the Watergate scandals, and A.J. Weberman, who has the biggest and best JFK assassination site on the web, it's a hard one to read. You got to scroll down each page before you can get to the next. Very old-fashioned, but it's got more data in it than any other. Weberman has done a lot of research on that too, and it seems that Nixon had a code he used for certain subjects, and the whole Bay of Pigs thing was his code for the Kennedy assassination.
Oh.
And if that's true, if Ehrlichman is telling the truth and Weberman has got the backup evidence correct, then Hunt was threatening to reveal something about the Kennedy assassination that Nixon was willing to pay $1 million to cover up. This is the kind of theory that I find remotely plausible and not totally crazy. Because Nixon did start paying the money to Hunt, and Hunt's wife was carrying some of it when she was on a plane that crashed under very mysterious circumstances, Flight 553.
And because these are people who wouldn't involve themselves in flights of fancy, this is something concrete that they're talking about too.
Well, Nixon's willing to pay $1 million to cover it up. It means something.
Yes.
And Flight 553, the pilot who, eerily enough, was named Captain Whitehouse, he had a lot of cyanide in his bloodstream, which is the explanation. The official explanations of that are it was gas released when the plane crashed, but the critics claim that you couldn't get that much cyanide from that. It would have to be put into him in his drink or something like that. But Spotlight magazine printed the photographs of the three tramps with Howard Hunt, an attempt to show one of the three tramps on the grassy knoll was Howard Hunt.
Behind the fence on the grassy knoll.
Yeah, and he sued them for libel, and he lost. The jury not only found Spotlight innocent, but one of the foremen of the jury told the press afterwards that the defense counsel, Mark Lane, by the way, she said, Mr. Lane wanted us to believe the government shot the president. As we examined all the evidence, we came to the conclusion the government did shoot the president.
Was there anybody looking into these things besides yourself?
Oh, yeah, there's the Assassination Investigation Committee in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
They are very well informed about all this. They got a list of over 100 people connected with the Kennedy assassination who also died
under
very mysterious circumstances, like Albert Guy Bogard.
Right.
Who was Albert Guy Bogard was an automobile salesman who said Lee Harvey Oswald came in, took a car for a test drive, went 70 miles an hour on the freeway, and gave him a lot of pro-Soviet propaganda, and said he was coming into a lot of money. Now, Oswald did not drive.
Maybe it was Kerry Thornley.
Maybe it was Kerry. It was, well, he's called the second Oswald, the guy in that story, who appears several times around Dallas in mysterious contexts. But Albert Guy Boguy, after telling that story, he was found dead in a cemetery, shot through the head, pronounced suicide. There's so many people who committed suicide.
Under mysterious, non-suicidal
George
circumstances.
de Mohrenschildt, who was a friend of Oswald's, even though he was a CIA operative and very anti-Soviet. When he was subpoenaed by the House Select Committee on Assassinations, he was found dead and pronounced a suicide, although his wife refused to accept that. Sam Giancana, who was suspected by a lot of people, think the Mafia were involved. As soon as he got a subpoena from the House Select Committee on Assassinations, he was shot through the mouth. The Mafia calls that sasso in bocca. That's punishment for suspected informers. Johnny Roselli, when he got his subpoena, he disappeared and showed up floating in a barrel in the Gulf of Mexico. I could go on and on. Cambridge, like I said, this group in Cambridge has over 100 cases like that. It does make you wonder.